Alright, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be diving deep into a story that's pretty crazy, pretty messed up, but ultimately a story about resilience, about overcoming your circumstances, and about how even the most adverse upbringing doesn't have to define you. This is the story of Sean Diddy Combs, one of the most successful and influential music moguls of all time. But Diddy's path to the top was anything but easy. In fact, it was downright tumultuous, and a big reason for that was the influence of one person, his own mother, Janice Combs. Now, a lot of you may know Diddy as this uber-wealthy, ultra-successful, jet-setting businessman and artist. But what you may not know is the dark underbelly of his upbringing, how his mother's wild lifestyle and poor parenting choices set him up for years of struggle, trauma, and an incredibly difficult road to the top. You see, Diddy's mother Janice was no ordinary mom. In fact, she was basically the polar opposite of the nurturing, supportive parent that every child needs. Instead, she was a vivacious, free-spirited party animal who introduced Diddy to the world of drugs, alcohol, and wild, hedonistic nightlife from a very young age. And that set the stage for Diddy's tumultuous childhood, and the effects of that upbringing would haunt him for years to come. But the amazing thing is, despite all the odds stacked against him, Diddy was still able to claw his way to the top and become one of the most successful and powerful figures in the entertainment industry. So today, we're going to unpack this incredible story. We're going to look at how Janice Combs' partying lifestyle and poor parenting choices impacted Diddy's childhood, the trauma and challenges he faced as a result, and ultimately, how he was able to rise above it all and achieve astounding levels of success. This is a story about resilience, about overcoming your circumstances, and about not letting your past define you. So if you're ready, let's dive in. Sean Combs was born in 1969 in Harlem, New York to Janice Combs. From a very early age, it was clear that Janice was no ordinary mother. She was a vivacious, free-spirited woman who loved to party and live life to the fullest. In fact, Janice was known in her Harlem community as quite the wild child. She loved to go out clubbing, drinking, and indulging in all sorts of hedonistic pleasures. And unfortunately, she ended up dragging young Sean along for the ride from a shockingly young age. By the time Sean was just 7 or 8 years old, Janice was regularly taking him to nightclubs and bars with her. She would dress him up in miniature suits and ties, and parade him around these adult party environments, exposing him to all sorts of unsavory characters and behaviors. Sean would sit and watch as his mother and her friends drank, smoked, and carried on raucously into the wee hours of the morning. He was a young, impressionable child thrust into this world of excess, indulgence, and lack of discipline or boundaries. And it didn't stop there. Janice would also take Sean to house parties and underground freak-off events, wild, uninhibited gatherings where people would engage in all sorts of debaucherous, sexually charged activities. Again, Sean, just a child, would be present for all of this, completely out of his element. I remember being at these parties where people were just going crazy, getting drunk, getting high, having sex in the middle of the room, Diddy has recalled. I was a little kid, just sitting in the corner, watching everything. Needless to say, this was an incredibly damaging and traumatic way for a young child to be raised. Instead of a stable, nurturing home environment, Sean was constantly surrounded by adult vices, chaos, and the complete lack of parental supervision or guidance. And the effects of this upbringing would haunt Diddy for years to come. He's described feeling incredibly isolated, confused, and disoriented as a child, unable to relate to his peers who had more traditional, stable upbringings. I felt very alone, Diddy has said. I didn't have a normal childhood at all. I was around a lot of crazy stuff that kids shouldn't be around. To make matters even worse, Janice Combs was not just a negligent, partying mother. She was also physically and emotionally abusive towards Sean. By all accounts, she had a very short temper and would frequently lash out at her son, often hitting him and verbally berating him. My mother was very tough on me, Diddy has said. She would hit me and yell at me a lot. I was scared of her. This abuse, combined with the unstable, chaotic environment Janice created, had a profoundly negative impact on Sean's psyche and development as a child. He grew up feeling deeply insecure, anxious, and unsure of himself, traits that would linger well into his adult life. I had a lot of self-esteem issues growing up, Diddy has admitted. I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel good enough. I was always trying to prove myself and be perfect. Unfortunately, Janice's partying ways and abusive behavior didn't just affect Sean. It also had a devastating impact on the family's financial stability as well. Janice was never able to hold down a steady job, and the family lived in near-poverty conditions for much of Diddy's childhood. "We were really poor," Diddy has said. "My mother would spend all the money on partying and couldn't keep a job. We were always getting evicted and moving from place to place." This constant instability and lack of resources only compounded the trauma and difficulty of Diddy's upbringing. He witnessed firsthand how his mother's irresponsible choices and reckless lifestyle could plunge a family into dire straits. So by the time he reached his teenage years, Sean Combs was already a young man who had experienced more adversity and hardship than most people do in a lifetime. He was a product of a deeply dysfunctional and unstable home environment, shaped by a mother who was more interested in partying than parenting. And the effects of this upbringing would continue to haunt Diddy well into adulthood. But amazingly, despite all the odds stacked against him, he would eventually find a way to rise above it all and achieve remarkable success. As Diddy reached his teenage years, the trauma and challenges of his upbringing began to manifest in various ways. Having been exposed to such an adult, chaotic lifestyle from a young age, he started to exhibit some concerning behaviors of his own. Diddy has openly admitted that as a teenager, he began experimenting with drugs and alcohol, just like his mother had done. He would sneak out to clubs and parties, trying to emulate the reckless, indulgent lifestyle he had witnessed growing up. "I got into a lot of trouble as a teenager," Diddy has said. "I was skipping school, getting into fights, doing drugs. I was just acting out in all kinds of ways." This troubled teenage phase was compounded by the fact that Diddy also struggled tremendously with his self-esteem and sense of identity. Having grown up feeling so insecure and unworthy, he was constantly seeking validation and approval from others. "I was always trying to be someone I wasn't," Diddy has shared. "I was so uncertain of myself, I was just desperate to fit in and be accepted." And unfortunately, this led Diddy down some very dark paths. In his late teens, he even got involved with petty crime and spent some time in jail, further derailing his life and exacerbating the trauma of his childhood. "I made some really bad choices as a young guy," Diddy has acknowledged. "I was hanging around the wrong people, doing the wrong things, and it landed me in jail for a little while." But through it all, there was a glimmer of hope within Diddy. Despite the immense challenges he faced, there was a fire burning inside him that refused to be extinguished. And that fire was his passion for music. Even as a young child, Diddy had always been drawn to the power and energy of music.